Here we are at Doran Beach in Bodega Bay. The sound quality out at the beach was so bad and the wind took over all the noise. So it's going to be a strange thing where I'll be talking, but it won't be in sync with my lips at all. I like to be pretty streamlined with the things that I take outside plein air painting. So that's why I chose this spot, because it has picnic benches. So then I don't need to worry about easels or things to like put my supplies on. I have a Tupperware box of brushes and gloves, a Tupperware box of my paints, my palette, and a small little canvas. It's actually a canvas board. It's easier to work small outdoors, so you're not carrying a lot of stuff. This is my little nifty traveling thinner carrier, but you can just as easily use a jar. And that's all you need. Let's get painting. Here we are. This is the scene I'm going to be painting. You can see the sun is going to be traveling behind that land mass back there. So I have that really sparkly water, pretty high contrast. The shadows are going to move towards me as we paint out here. Don't be surprised. You're going to start painting and then everything's going to change on you. You can see it's pretty windy. The sun's going to be moving. There's a bird right there sitting on the rocks. I am not going to paint that bird because it's going to move. But you're going to be having to paint pretty fast to keep up with everything. Don't be surprised if by the time you reach towards the end of your painting, everything's going to have changed at the top. So don't worry about that. We're just going to paint as quick as we can. Here's my palette. It's a pretty full palette. I have quite a lot of paint out here. I was thinking I was going to paint with a more limited palette and then got excited and put out probably more paint than I need for such a small canvas. And I'm all set up and ready to go. I've gotten kind of methodical about my painting, and don't by any means think that you need to do this, but I find it's pretty helpful to start at the top and work your way down, at least for starters. That will get your landscape kind of lined up in a way that what you're painting over is going to be kind of physically on top, and then it will look more visually in front of the other thing using overlap. With this sky, just remember, the sky reaches all the way to the ground. There's a tendency, especially young kids do this, where they put the blue of the sky at a strip along the top and then neglect that area where the land hits the horizon line. Remember, that blue goes all the way down, and it has a tendency to get lighter towards where it hits the horizon, because of the buildup of the atmosphere that you're looking through. So check out the sky. Nothing is set in stone. Look up high and look then down towards the horizon and try to get that shifting in hue and in value as it gets down towards the land. Here I'm going in to start painting that land. I've given myself a treat of a nice clean brush. I have my sky brush set aside. First thing when I'm looking at this land mass, I'm going to go in with the darks. The sun, as I said, is going to be setting behind this landmass, so the value difference between the land and the sky is pretty extreme. And I'm going to use this dark and place it throughout that hillside. I'm not going to get totally caught up in getting one little tiny area perfect. I'm going to work sort of throughout it. Think about the direction of your brushstroke as you're moving through these forms. Don't get lazy and all have everything in one direction. Shift up the direction of your brush strokes and the way you're moving that paint along the surface of that form. Remember to stay away from black. Use your chromatic blacks, not your too black. I've entered in a lot of the colors and the values in that landmass. I'm going to introduce yet another brush. I find it so much easier to use all my brushes and then clean them at the end, as opposed to constantly having to clean my brushes in between. I really barely use the thinner. I'm using multiple brushes and rags to clean in between. Unless you're going in with a really light, because here I'm going in with a pretty light value, so I just grabbed a clean brush. If you have no clean brushes left and you're going in with a light value or a super dark value, you do want to get a nice clean brush. Remember the painting that we just made with the Impressionist painting, and how the Impressionists touch the surface and really let the paint do the work for you. Don't forget what we've learned. Look at the value difference and letting the paint do the work. Don't be afraid to put a lot of paint on there. So, how to make things look farther away and closer towards you. One thing, of course, is overlap. That's why I'm working back to front. Another thing is contrast. In general, you have higher contrast in closer towards you. Things get have less contrast further away. And then there are also more details in the foreground. So keep those things in mind if you find your space is flattening out, to increase the contrast in the foreground, increase the detail in the foreground, and make sure that that foreground is overlapping the things in the distance. Don't get too precious. If something is not looking good, remember your rag and wipe it out. This is not an opportunity to become uptight. So if something's not working, wipe it out with a rag. It can also be a useful tool to help kind of coalesce things. So I'm struggling here with this big rock. To me, it looks like a giant dung ball, and it's just getting too flabby looking and roundish. So sometimes you can use your palette knife as a tool also to kind of knock things into shape. If things are looking a little too, I don't know what the word is, like floppy and soft, use your palette knife to knock it into shape. And last but not least, remember, you must step away from your work. Who knows what's going on? You could find that you're way off with something. Just make sure to stand back, because you could get completely preoccupied with one little detail, one little area, and lose sight of the bigger picture. When you get back into the studio and look at your painting, you might find that your colors are a lot darker than you realized. Out in that bright sunshine, things have a tendency to look lighter. You can make some adjustments back in the studio if you choose to, or not. Totally up to you. Happy painting!